Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of our reading of Bhagavad Gita. And our lineup today is I'm Advait. We have Sachi, Raj, and Akash with us today to discuss this text. And we'll be covering the second half of chapter 2 today. We did the first half of chapter 2 in the previous episode. And we stopped at text 36. Today, we'll be starting from text 37. Once again, we'll not be reading the Sanskrit text or the Romanization. We'll only be reading the translation and not even the interpretation given by the author. So let's start with text 37. It goes, O son of Kunti, Arjun, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. Right, so regardless of what you
Yeah, I
do,
think
you'll attain what is desirable, I suppose.
so. I think the implication here is that even if you are killed, then you are attaining some kind of heaven. So, like we discussed last time, it is not. It is something else also. Like there is some kind of a heaven which we can attain even after death. So, is it the soul
Right.
going to the heaven, or
Um,
we have to?
I guess it's not absolutely important for us to understand that mechanics for us to like appreciate what the sentence is saying. I mean, we can just assume that the soul goes to heaven, I guess, comes back and takes another form. I don't think it really matters.
No, but because it says something about soul, right? We were assuming that, at least I was assuming that soul does not take anything from our action. So, so it seems that it can enjoy the pleasures of heaven once it liberates from our body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the concept of heaven itself becomes very vague since we're interpreting it in so many ways. Like, for example, as we said, is heaven being one with God, or is heaven being, the one where Indra resides, or stuff like that? So it depends, I guess, on which context are we interpreting this thing on.
Yeah, it's personal. Yeah, I agree. Right.
It's not just personal. I guess on these two, according to the text, only these two are the possible interpretations for attaining heaven. So, going to Indra's heaven is one thing, and being one with God is something that is even higher heaven, I guess. Heaven, or heavenliness. Maybe that's a good way to put it.
I think in this context, it means more about Indra's heaven than being one with God.
Yes.
Because he's comparing that heavenly planets with earthly kingdom. So I think at least in this context, it means it's amongst the hell, heaven, and earth.
Yeah.
So Krishna is basically telling Arjun the possible two outcomes of the battle. If you win, then you are gonna win the earthly kingdom. If not, you're gonna not rule. You're gonna be able to be in the heavenly kingdom.
Yeah.
In any case,
so yeah, I mean, I guess it's in odds with all of our beliefs that there is some heaven up there in the skies, literally.
Right.
And I think this is just something we'll have to agree to disagree with the text with. So I guess let's move on. 638. Do your fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so you shall never incur sin. So yeah, this is pretty interesting because in his particular case it's fighting, but if we sort of extend it to all of us, means that do your duty without thinking of happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and that's the ideal way of executing your duty, and that's a pretty interesting idea.
Can it be done? Like, how can I be dispassionate about something at the same time work very hard on that thing? So I don't know if, at least for me, it is quite conflicting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it says be dispassionate about it. It's just that regardless of whether you think you will be happy or sad, or you will gain something or not, or whatever that is, you'll win or not, regardless of all of that, do your duty. I don't think it necessarily says be detached from your duty or something like that.
Yeah.
No, but I think in some sense
So-
it is saying something like be detached from your, not detached from your duty, but from detached from your
outcome.
actions.
Yeah.
I think
Detached
it's
from the
more
outcome.
get
Yeah.
detached from the outcome. Don't be so worried about it to be good or it to be bad.
Yeah.
Just do the duty that you're supposed to do, and you won't have any sins. You'll be sin free basically.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the guidance given by Lord Krishna here.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, that's true. He's implying to do things for the sake of itself. So doing that is the way to never incur sin in some sense.
Right.
So, but you have to be very. So we can, like, for example, we do a lot of stuff, not for sake of it, but for what we gain from it, right? So it is.
Right.
Sometimes we do, even while doing so, we feel that we are doing it just for the sake of it. So it's a very difficult thing to do and be conscious about. So maybe,
Yeah, I guess not be too attached, I suppose. I mean,
Yeah, don't be too focused with the outcome. That's all that he's saying.
Yeah.
For example, if you're giving exam, then study for the sake of studying, and don't worry about if you'll be pass or fail. If you're gonna be passed, that's great. If you're gonna be failed, then like it's not because you did wrong,
Yeah.
but like
no,
it's
But
not.
at
mean
the
that-
start, you have to think that you want to pass, right? Before studying, before engaging in the action of study, then you have to think that you want to pass, right? Without that belief, you cannot engage in the act of studying.
Yeah, but Lord Krishna here is trying to dissuade Krishna from
Yes,
focusing so much about the result. You may need to focus, but that's what Lord Krishna is trying to dissuade Krishna from thinking or focusing too much on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you in the fact that while doing the action, it is good to not look at the outcome because it we kind of lose focus from the what we are doing if we are worried too much about the outcome. But at the beginning, there is a need of looking at the action, looking at the consequence or outcome of the action, right? You desire something, that's why you choose to do it. Or how else
What
so is
it's not like you desire something and you're not doing. He's trying to shift or just focus on not the outcome, not the desire to get something, but to do good what he is about to do. So if you are going to give exam, then don't focus on being pass or fail, but study so that you are studying well. Like give exam so that you are giving exam well. If that
in this
makes
point, yeah,
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. But in this, even though it makes sense, I kind of have to disagree with, because I have because I believe what he means when he says something like, fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress. He means that, if you do, the main goal of life is, in some sense, let's say the foundation of life is suffering. That we've established, I guess, right? Maybe all of us believe that life is somehow suffering, but there is also something like happiness and pleasure and stuff like that. So the goal in this book is to somehow transcend that in some sense. So it's not about doing well in exams so you do not lose focus. It's more maybe like getting out of this trap of being sad and happy, because to give up suffering, you also have to give up happiness in some sense. So maybe that's the idea, and that's at least my point of view in that.
No, but he
That's
can
an
do it by
kind of-
engaging in any kind of action, right? He does not necessarily have to fight and be dispassionate with the outcome of fighting. He can choose to not fight and be dispassionate about the outcome of not fighting. So why is there some kind of persuasion for him to fight? Why is
Yes,
the Krishna making him to fight?
Yeah, I cannot give you full answer on that, but I have a partial answer on this as well. It says because to not to fight is to do something in some sense, if that makes any sense at all. It's like when you fight for the sake of fighting, you do it without consideration of happiness or distress, if he does it that way. But if he's choosing to not do it, then it's something like he's choosing to not do it because of some sort of
Goal in
desires
mind.
and some sort of motive there, because he doesn't want to make his family unhappy, or he doesn't want to disappoint, maybe, I don't know, his God. And so even that is considered to be maybe a sin, because you're looking for an outcome.
Yeah.
And when you're doing stuff, you should not look for an outcome. But it's very unclear why.
Yeah,
Not fighting.
there are layers to that. I understand. I mean, it doesn't go only as far as do it without anything in mind. That I guess that'll come later. More of this discussion will come later when. Yeah, I think we'll get to more of that because it'll be mentioned more later on.
Yeah, and I get the point that Raj is trying to make, that fight. You can choose not to fight, and not fight in such a way that you are become detached and have no expectation results from not doing anything. You're not doing anything because you're not expecting anything. You're not expecting it to be happy or be sad by not doing anything. In that sense, also, it could be considered an attachment. But the more, in the bigger context of this thing, I think it's to put emphasis on duty, that he's making such a big fuss about, doing things for the sake of itself.
Yeah, I agree. It's about transcending the whole trap, as you said.
Yeah.
Okay, so next text 39. Thus far, I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, Arjun, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. Explain that in a bit. Let's see.
An explanation.
Yeah, it has to do with the idea of karma yoga, I guess. So he will explain this in details in, I think, the 3rd chapter. But we can move on for now.
Right. So
but I think here it is. I think it will be beneficial to highlight the theory of Sankhya that he talks about, analytical study. So it is one of the 6 branches of this Hindu philosophy. So
let's go back there. Yeah, go on.
So this analytical way of studying is the rational part of Hindu philosophy, which does not even believe in God. So they do everything logically and rationally and build up a philosophical argument of some sense. Then later on, this concept of God and karma yoga and everything, action comes later in other part of the philosophy. So there are, I think, 6 philosophies in Hindu philosophy as well. So there are subdivisions of Hindu philosophy as well.
Okay, so this is one of them you're saying. Sankhya or analytical study is one of them.
Yeah. So he has told that he has described through analytical sense of reason. Now he will go into some other.
Okay, so yoga, I guess, in work with fruitive results, yoga is another one, I assume?
Yeah, yoga.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Right, so let's move on to the next one. It's 14. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. We don't understand this?
Not really.
I think we can take in this. I want to take back the analogy of exams. So as I told, what Krishna is telling Arjun is that you should not focus on whether you will pass or fail. Just give exam and study for the exam in a way that you do well in exam, not necessarily focus on pass or fail. So this passing or failing is in a sort of fear that he will have if he focuses on that. And if you remove that focus, remove the outcome, remove what it may, what the outcome may be, then
the fear is also gone.
Removing that fear from your head.
Okay.
You are removing that worry from your head.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's what it's trying to.
Might be.
So like can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. I think the previous text was also trying to express the same thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, maybe the idea is once you give up the consequences, you have no more anxieties, because
Yeah.
anxiety mostly is due to the future, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like thinking about the future.
Yeah.
Okay, let's imagine a doctor who's about to operate. So if he thinks about if the person may die, then his hand will start shaking. He will become really fearful, and there's a pretty good chance he will actually fail too.
Mm.
So if he stops focusing on the outcome and do his best as he
Yeah.
can during the operation, without worrying too much about whether he can pass or whether he can't, then like not only will that increase his chance of success, but will eliminate that fear from his head.
Yeah.
So I think
That's
that's
a good
possible
point.
explanation.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. So move to the next. 41. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. Yeah, so if you, like Akash just said, if you just have, in the case of the doctor, let's say if you have one goal of of operating the best that he can,
Right.
their aim is one, and the what would you say, the power that you get from the determination is many branched, I suppose.
Yeah, it is good that if one identifies oneself as a doctor, then he must pursue that whatever the doctor does with full focus, without taking this thing into account, outcome into account. But how does one identify oneself as a doctor itself is a question.
Yeah, it's a big
that I am
question. But
facing.
yeah, before going to that details, I want to point out something that I've noticed. I think, when he says their aim should be one, it does not mean that you should have one goal in life and pursue it. It could mean that, but I think in this context, it's meaning that it just trying the aim is to be one with the Krishna consciousness, which as this
Okay.
book. Yeah, so that is the aim, and I think those who are irresolute have many branches, means that they are somehow always diverted from this goal of being one with the universe. So I think,
Okay. Okay.
so to put it that way, but I think if you interpret it that way, as being doctor, and how do you identify yourself as being a doctor, what you should be is an entirely different question. And for that, I think there is something like your inner voice that helps you to maybe identify who you are. So that could
What
be,
if there are many voices?
yeah. And if you have many voices, then you become an irresolute who has many branches.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay, I
Yeah,
guess
let's
let's
move on.
move on. It's 42 and 43. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive actions for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense of gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. Right. So again, I think this goes back to not doing things for to go to heavenly planets, or for a good birth in the next life, or for power and things like that. And people who believe that people who do things for these reasons think that there is nothing more to life than only that. And the text is trying to make the point that that's not it. That it needs to be transcended. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's trying to explain what Vedas have in it. So Vedas not only say that you have to be one with the God, but also it talks about all the opulence and materialistic gains that you will get if you follow whatever that has been recommended in the Vedas.
Yeah.
So a normal person, a general person who doesn't know too much about God and the need to be one with them, they will follow Vedas only for those short-term achievements. But as Advait said, Lord Krishna is trying to focus that Vedas is more than just that, and it is not only those small achievements. Mm,
That
yeah, I think,
matters.
yeah. That's
I
true.
That's
think
something.
I don't know if it is quite irrelevant here, but suppose I do not think about my outcome of my action. Why will I do that? Because I want to be the one with God. Maybe like if I don't see the outcome in, I do not see the consequence of my action, then maybe I am exempted from the sins. If that is my desire of committing the action, then does it fall under this? Uh, am I
That's the right
desiring
question.
something as an outcome and then again performing the
Yeah,
action?
that's exactly the right question. Yeah, and yeah, it's a question we'll have to answer at some, like, not
Yeah,
desiring
can you reframe the
something.
questions again, because I'm very confused about the question.
I think his question. You can tell me if it's right, but not desiring something is also desiring.
Yep,
So,
that's the first trap that you fall into when you start not
yeah,
desiring, I guess.
yeah,
And
And not
also this,
desiring is also itself a form of desiring. But
yeah,
I think Lord Krishna is telling that it is okay. You should not desire in the materialistic gains, but you should rather desire being one with the God.
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that part is exempted from this. Yeah, yeah, I think that.
yeah, and this, I think I also want to point out something that is very central to our tradition, I guess. It says that Vedas recommends various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets. Like, it's very common to see this in our culture, because in action as well as in do performing some sort of rituals. For example, we have Saraswati, right? We pray to Saraswati for
yeah,
for gaining knowledge. So
yeah,
it's very representative of what we do in our life as well. For example, reading for the
Yeah.
if you read for the sake of it, yeah, if you are able to do that, then you have transcended in some sense. But
Mm.
you're just reading for gain, like it would be like the Saraswati will give you what you deserve, but you should not be entitled to it.
yeah, yeah,
But Vedas give you a way to, how to gain benefits from all these types of karmic cycles, I guess, karmic consequences. What you should do in order to gain uh, higher power, higher life, better life in next life or something like that. But the main point is to even transcend this, and
yeah,
that is what Krishna is criticizing in this
Yeah,
text,
he's
I guess.
criticizing men of small knowledge.
yeah. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. 44. In the minds of those who, sorry? Oh. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. Right. So it's saying that if you're attached to those things, then you're not truly serving God. Yeah, and that's
And the
non-ideal.
karma will always, yeah. And there will always be consequences. Like, you do good or do bad, you'll always get what you deserve. But the point is not that it will always be that. You cannot change it. So the point is to somehow transcend yourself from it. So, and the sense to transcend from it, you have to give up the sense enjoyment and materialistic values, I guess. Not values, but materialism. I don't know.
Yeah, so if you're doing it for those, let's say, ulterior motives, ulterior reasons, then you're not doing the best that you can because of, let's say, those distractions. I guess you can look at it that way. And because of that, you will not get what you would have gotten had you transcended that, I suppose.
No, I think we can do both. For example, we can do very good in for example, I will take the example of Akash when he said, you can study very hard and you can gain good marks, but you can also do the same without. You can also gain good marks expecting that you will get good marks by working very hard on it, or you can work hard on it and not expect anything and you'll still get good marks. So this is the material layer that's going on. But if you want to go layer above, you have to give up that expectation. So,
Yeah, I understand.
yeah, I think we've been talking about the same thing over and over, and
Yeah.
then like just paraphrasing it.
The text is saying the same thing over and over again in our defense. Anyway, 45.
It's the same thing that we're trying to explain in different words.
Yeah. The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes, be free from all the dualities and from all the anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self.
Let's
In the three modes now. Yeah.
you.
Okay, let's move on.
What are the three modes?
I think he'll explain this
It has not
later.
been explained yet, has it?
Has it not been?
No, he has not explained it. I think he'll explain it as we go along below.
Oh,
I don't know if he'll explain it in this chapter or some other chapter, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, chapter 2 is a summary of whatever is in everything in Gita. So I guess
I think I have a different this version of the book, and there they have defined three qualities. I think these three things. So one is indifferent towards the pair of opposites. I am just reading from a text. Okay.
Okay.
Indifferent towards the pair of opposites. That is one quality. Eternally fixed in truth. That is second quality. Third is free from thoughts of acquisition. So these are the three things.
So
can you tell me again?
Yeah. So the first one is indifferent towards the pairs of opposites.
Pairs of opposites.
Towards the pairs of opposites.
Yep.
Second is eternally fixed in truth.
Okay.
And third one is free from thoughts of acquisition.
Yeah. So as far as I can tell by hearing this, I think first one, pairs of opposite, be indifferent to a pair of opposite, meaning that the consequences are always dual in nature. Like it can be good or bad, happy or sad, or glorious or not glorious. So I mean, indifference to pairs of opposite means that, because it maybe I don't know, it'd be in order to transcend yourself, you have to be indifferent to these and just move on, go with the flow in the way the Taoist philosophy puts it. And eternally fixed in truth, I cannot make sense of it very good right now. And what was the third one? Free from
thoughts of acquisition.
Yeah, free from acquisition. It also seems like the same way of saying the first thing, like not expecting anything else. Or maybe they're different, but that's at least what I feel they are about. Could be about potentially.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So let's see the next text. All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a greater reservoir of water. Similarly, all purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. Okay, so go one, as such I said, layer beyond the Veda and beyond doing things to get into heaven or to get a better life. And that sort of encompasses whatever you would have gotten had you followed that. So there's not much more to that. 47. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of the action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. All right, so this is a very good condensation of whatever he's been saying so far. Don't be
the question that the question that Raj was putting was he could choose not to do it, and maybe I think this could be the answer, but to that question, not completely, but still getting towards it, I guess.
But I think inaction is justified in a sense that if you perform some action for the action's sake and later on not enjoy it, it is better to not perform any action and just think about what you want to do. In that sense, is inaction justified? Should you always be performing some kind of action? And the question always remains that what actions should we perform, and who says that what we have to do.
So what action we have to perform is we have to perform our duty. Basically, if you are a warrior, then you're supposed to fight. If you are a teacher, you're supposed to teach. If you are a student, you're supposed to learn. So yeah, I think that's what Lord Krishna is.
I think it's also the case that if okay, so I think it's the case that if you can truly execute inaction without really expecting anything, then I guess it's also justified. I don't see why it wouldn't be. But if you're doing inaction because of some of these desires that we've been talking about, then doing that inaction is also kind of a dishonest action. So
Yep,
I think
that's
less than 1 minute.
Because the way that Raj puts it is that if he does not, if we are not supposed to enjoy the results in some sense, then why should you do it? And why should you do it? Better not do it. In that sense, you're still inducing this desire within yourself, which causes you this. It causes you happiness, but it also causes you suffering. So these are as we speak before, the pairs of opposite which exist together. So in order to give up one, you have to give up both.
Right. Let's move on to the next one. Perform your duty equiposed. Perform your duty equiposed, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. Okay, so the state of desirelessness, I guess, is called yoga. Is that
the same thing?
Yeah, same thing. O Dhananjaya, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service, and in that consciousness surrender unto the Lord. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers.
So another thing that I want to point out about the duty, another thing that I want to point out about the duty part is now I think this text is starting to give you the answers to how to know your duty. Not completely, I guess, but it says that to do things for itself is to do things for the God, for the Lord Krishna, I guess. So that we still have to understand what it means, but and the way to perform your duty is to perform for the sake of devoting your actions to God and not for the results.
And so the very act of doing things for themselves is kind of duty. Yeah. That's a good point. Let's move on to the next one. 50. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad actions even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. And so, same thing. 51. By thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, they become free from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries by going back to Godhead. Okay, so by transcending this,
I think it's similar to whatever that has been said.
Yeah.
I just have to point out one thing here is that in this translation they are referring this to Godhead, right? But in the translation that I'm seeing, it is not exactly written Godhead, but in the wisdom of the person. Those who are established in wisdom, the wise ones who have abandoned the fruit of actions, are freed from the bondage of rebirth. So I think, I don't know if the translation is also kind of.
Could you read that again? The text.
So I'll read it.
Yeah.
51, I think, right?
Yeah, 51.
Yeah, those who are established in wisdom, the wise ones who have abandoned the fruit born of action, are freed from the bondage of rebirth.
River? Bondage of what?
Rebirth. Yeah.
Oh, rebirth. Okay, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the cycle of
When-
birth and death.
Yeah, they go to the place that is free from pain. So that is
Okay.
the translation that I am reading. So I think, I don't know if that is implied, that devotion part is implied in that translation. Or...
I mean, we also have sort of synonyms here, so I guess it's an accurate translation as well. But I mean, we get the point. I think it's similar enough that we don't need to quibble about the details, I think. Yeah. Right, so let's move on. 52. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. Okay, so.
In here, delusion means desire for materialistic gains.
Right.
Yep, that's true. So that's the main idea, I guess. The delusion is if you're too into your senses, if you're too obsessed with your senses in some sense,
yeah.
You become delusional, and the Lord becomes very hard to figure out, I guess. You become confused, and your intelligence is distorted by your senses.
Right.
Because you're seeking pleasure, and in doing so, you're also getting pain and all that stuff. I guess that's the same.
Yeah. Right.
So I think the spirituality part is quite mysterious, in a sense that all the spiritual aspects claim that they have to transcend beyond this materialistic thing, right? So I think what they are talking about here is like the causality of the things. We should transcend beyond the causality. Like if you perform this action, then this will consequence. But I don't know. Like we are a material being who are embodied in this universe, which is based on the causality effect. So that mysterious part is always there, and they claim that you should transcend and only you know. So that part, I think, is quite unsettling for me.
Yeah, it could be unsettling, but the idea is to let the causality play out while you just in this according to this philosophy, stand out of it somehow. Maybe it could be not such a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing, bad thing. But the philosophy is leading towards that.
Okay. 53. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Okay, so if you sort of, as I said, free yourself from delusion, then you will attain what is divine consciousness. That's it. Or Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, again, it's
same thing.
Yeah, pretty similar to before, I guess.
Yep. Okay,
in this case, I think the duty is performing whatever that's been written in Vedas, and the focus, which Krishna is not recommended to focus on, are the flowery gains that has been written in the Vedas. And if you just follow the Vedas without expecting whatever Vedas has promised, then you'll transcend.
So next one goes, this is 54. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit and how does he walk?" Okay, so what exactly does it mean? Yeah.
Yeah, finally we have something to move on from.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to 55. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna said, "O Parth, Arjun, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness."
Right. When he doesn't desire anything else and feels happy being with himself, being one with the nature, then that's it. You have transcended. Congratulations.
I'm not sure what it means by finding satisfaction in the self alone.
Well, that means he doesn't have desire for more wealth, more opulence, or yeah, that's basically it. Like he doesn't need
For me,
more property, more prosody.
I think the one who knows what he is happy with. I am happy with this much. If somebody knows that, then that is something like content in self.
Yeah.
Sachi, you had something to say?
yeah, I mean, yeah, for me, it was more like I understood this as, after you have transcended in in this philosophical sense, from happiness and sadness, you've given up both of them, right?
Mm.
So once you've given up both of them, now you're satisfied, and once you become satisfied and you do not want happiness or sadness as consequences, you've merged with the highest, the Godhead,
Yes.
as said in this text, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. Right. So let's move on to the next one. 56. One who is not disturbed in mind even amidst the threefold miseries or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger is called a sage of steady mind. Once again, it's more about being detached from attachment.
Yeah,
Yeah. What?
we're talking so much about this philosophy. It's not about just the text. It's more about the attachment, the emphasis on being detached to everything.
Yeah.
It's a good philosophy, and it's a very interesting philosophy as well. But is it possible?
Yeah.
That's the question, I guess.
I am hoping that he tells how to do that also in the
It is
later part of
possible.
the text.
It's not impossible. It is possible. That's what the monks and sages do, right? Trying to be happy with what they have, trying to get detached with the materialistic world. And that's what Lord Krishna is trying to guide person to do. And in turn, through this text, trying to guide us.
So this is text.
Yeah, the skepticism in me is saying something like, the monks and all those people claim that they can attain this goodness, but maybe they're just acting. I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
I mean, that's
They
perfectly
have not
valid.
reached that level of self-consciousness yet then. But if you think about Lord Buddha, who is thought to have reached that level of self-consciousness, then he's one who has transcended.
Yeah, but maybe the idea is to
But
maybe the
Maybe
idea
also
is
it's
to
not like always extreme. You have transcended, you have not transcended. Maybe it's also like maybe there's a gradient in between. Like to some extent, you may have transcended, but not fully. Does that make sense? I mean, from being too much affected, too much disturbed by the materialistic world, you start being lesser and lesser disturbed, and then a point where you get not disturbed at all. And maybe the monks who assume they are monks are undisturbed as like somewhere in between, but not completely to the far end.
Yeah, so this philosophy is something like that should be tested subjectively that's why maybe it's called self-realization. And even when you reach this transcendence, according to this philosophy, you're still acting out in the world. So we wouldn't know that someone has transcended or something like that, because he's only telling us words. And
I mean, like there's this I forget what the precise wording is, but the truly transcended person is more likely to be found within society rather than outside of society, like something like that. It's like, it's not that when you leave society and you go into a forest and like sit under a tree to meditate that you've truly understood transcendence or you've truly transcended. It's more like you're doing your duty, whatever you're supposed to do, despite all the miseries in life, despite all the happiness, the summer and the winter, as this text said. Despite all of that, is doing his duty without expecting anything, and that is true transcendence. Yeah.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. So let's read the next text. In the material
picture.
Yeah.
And then approachable.
The material world, the one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Yeah, it's more of that. And I guess I have something to say about it from the perspective of Western psychology, from Jungian psychology. There's the saying that if you're irritated by some behavior of someone, then you have that exact same behavior unconscious in you, something like that. Like if you're projecting sort of that part of yourself onto the other person and being irritated by it. But
Right.
yeah, so what
You
it
start
means,
doubting other people when you think like you might do the same to other person to deceive them.
Precisely, yeah. And
Right?
so yeah,
That's an interesting thought.
yeah. And so
in Jungian psychology, it's like that. Yeah.
Like it's said that if the person who has truly transcended in that sense, you know, he doesn't, like, he understands the evil, let's say, like he understands his own capacity for that, and so he doesn't get let's say irritated, for the lack of a better term, by that. I think that's an interesting.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say. It's more like the things that you're likely to be irritated are the things that you have excluded from your personality, which goes into your shadow, as in Jungian psychology. So when you see those personalities arising from someone else, it somehow inflicts some sort of irritation in you, because you've rejected that part of yourself, and when you see it within others, it creates there's this inner conflict between that part of your personality and your ego, I guess. And as you said, to be calm and to be fixed in this transcendental knowledge could be some sense in this Jungian psychology, which is called the integration, right? To acceptance of all of your personalities. And
integration
when you're integrated, I guess, when you're integrated, maybe they don't affect you as much, and that is in some sense partly somehow related
also
to
fits
transcendence.
into that. Yeah, that's true. I agree. Yeah. So let's move on to the next, I suppose. 58. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Okay, similar. 59. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remain, but ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste is fixed in consciousness. Read that again. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment. The soul doesn't take part in the sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. But sure, if
So
I think what it's trying to say is you pray Saraswati to get knowledge, you pray Lakshmi to get some wealth, right? So right now our enjoyment is limited to just that wealth and that limited knowledge that we have asked for. But if we get to test something higher than that, suppose we get to meet Lord Krishna itself, and that is going to give us enjoyment far greater than receiving such little amount of wealth or knowledge, right? So if we get the taste of that higher sense, which in my example is meeting Lord Krishna himself, then we start not focusing on those little gains of knowledge, or little gains of the wealth. So I think that's what this is attempting to say.
So what is this higher test that it is saying?
Yes. Maybe I'll try to explain, because Akash is putting it in more in terms of gods and stuff like that. And so far we've come to the conclusion that the way to transcend ourselves is to give up our attachments to the results of our actions, right? So once we are able to do that, and once we experience that transcendence as we do this thing in which we do not expect any results from our actions. We get the taste of this higher higher consciousness. Let's put it that way. Once
you get
once
that,
we're able,
once you
once
get
we're able
that
to,
higher consciousness, we won't care about those little things anymore.
yeah. So we get the we've once we reach to that point, maybe we're able to tell the difference, and maybe we will be more likely to choose this higher transcendence as better than the lower sense gratifications consciousness.
Yeah, I understand. I agree. Right. So let's move to the next one.
Yeah.
60. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjun, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Right. So it's saying that the instantaneous gratification sensor within us is so strong that even if we're trying to achieve this sort of oneness with God, this higher taste that that the text mentioned, even for a person trying to do that, it's very difficult. It's difficult to give up sense gratification.
Yeah, it's a very, it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Let me just go back and try to rephrase, because it could it seems like very paradoxical, the previous sentence in this. This says, I really appreciate this sentence because it does not underestimate your senses, I guess. You know, the power that the
inclination
senses
to
and this material world has. And before it said that something like, once you taste this higher consciousness, you are able to fix yourself higher and not easily be persuaded by this essential nature of the world. But still, this says essential nature nonetheless can be so powerful that it can sway you away from that state of mind. And
so from personal experience,
bring you back
I can
down.
say, from personal experience, it's difficult, I suppose, to get that higher taste in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. If you get the higher taste, I suppose it becomes easier. But before that, I completely understand what you're saying, because I mean, all of us have been victims of this.
And that is the challenge that Lord Krishna is trying to put in this text, trying to show the challenge that normal people face in their pursuit of higher taste, higher consciousness.
Yeah, but the
Let's
paradox that I find, which
go ahead, Sachi.
Yeah, the paradox between this sentence and the sentence, the text before that, I find, which could be wrong, is that once there are people, maybe let's say someone has reached this consciousness, right, this higher consciousness, and so he is less likely to be, because he's more aware and more, I don't know, intelligent in this philosophical sense. So he will not be swayed away by these sensual material world. But the point I'm trying to make is there can be this state of mind where people think that they reach this higher transcendence, and then when you reach this fake transcendence level, you're likely to fall back, and this could seem in some sense paradoxical, I guess. It's just a speculation, so it's
that's a good point. Like it can
go into much details.
Like it's easy to deceive yourself into thinking that you've reached real transcendence when you really haven't. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Right, so let's move on to the next. 61. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as the man of steady intelligence. All right, so it's just merging with the higher consciousness. Once again, not much different. 62. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's just trying to explain that relation between attachment to objects and anger.
Yeah.
So if you get attached to something,
yeah,
you start developing lust for that, and if you develop lust, anger develops.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think we can look at it with an example.
Yeah.
Suppose let's imagine a kid who likes his teddy bear. So if he's completely attached to that teddy bear, now I don't think that's a good example. Let's move
It
forward.
gets burned and he gets angry.
Yeah. You can say, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this
He can attach it to some extent that he doesn't even want others to touch it. So maybe that would be lust in this case. I didn't want to move forward with this example because I didn't want to associate lust for a kid. But
yeah, I mean, when it's when this text is speaking about lust, it's not just speaking about sexual desire. It's lust for everything.
Even so,
it's a more general.
Should have come up with a better, more adult example.
It's okay. I think everyone understands.
So yeah, if that kid loses his teddy bear, then he'll get angry. But if he didn't have that teddy bear from the start itself, then he would never have become angry at all, right?
True.
Yeah.
So all the frustrations arises from this lust, I guess.
Yeah. Because in turn develops from attachment.
Yep.
So never get attached. You'll never get angry.
And there's a very wrong way of taking that. I just realized. But anyway, I guess we'll talk about that later. 63. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. Right? It's just describing the downhill slope.
Yeah. Like continue forward with the example of a kid. After he loses the teddy bear, he goes on a rampage, not caring about anything in the house, starts destroying the TV and stuff, which is in a way delusion. And with the delusion, bewilderment of memory, maybe he forgets what he used to watch in the TV, and that may be
in the end he gets a new teddy bear and he's attached to the new teddy bear.
Back to the better.
Yeah.
Well, that may not be the perfect example here, but
yeah, I mean it's valid.
Might see the point a little bit.
I think that anger is just this manifestation of incompletion of your desire, I guess. Right? So in that, since you're not getting what you wanted, you're bringing this, instead of accepting that you did not get it, you're still being consistent in your desire and projecting and not projecting, but acting it out as anger, and that is still not the giving up of desires, but still existing, but acting out of that existing desire, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In a sense, the text is trying to say that see the reality as it is, not the way that you want it to be. So if you see the reality as the way that you want it to be, then if the expectation and this thing, reality does not match, then the anger comes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right, let's move on to the next one then. 64. But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. Again, not much new things here. 65. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. Right? Before you can look at things more clearly. 66. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Yeah. Oh.
See here I find this paradox. Maybe the translation is not correct. Maybe there's something wrong. But
let's look at this.
After all this talk of transcendence,
yeah.
After all this talk of transcendence, still the goal is the happiness. How can there be any happiness without peace?
Okay, so literally,
so it's one thing that you can.
Yeah, like in the synonyms. If you look at the synonyms.
Happiness, I think it is quite good point that they are highlighting the happiness in a sense that once the one has relinquished all the sensation, then still is after the happiness. I don't know if
I guess it could be that once you have transcended that, then you experience sukha. I mean, you can say it's happiness, but whatever. It's not khushi. Khushi is, or maybe it's not Sanskrit. I'm not really sure. But sukha, I don't know if it's exactly happiness.
Trying to tell us to give up happiness all in itself. He's only trying to tell us in all his texts to give up attachment to the outcome, attachment to materials. Like, I don't think in any of the texts before this, he has told us to give up happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand the
what
point.
He has said in all the texts before is give up thinking about the outcome, forget about the outcome, and give up attachment to the materialistic
world. Happy or pain. Okay. I think in one of the texts he has said that do not try to make sense of pain or happiness. I think
right. Happiness and distress, gain and loss. I remember.
Refer to the outcome. Like, do not think about pain or happiness from the outcome. Like something like that. I think there was the connotation of the outcome somewhere in that text, upon which that was related.
Yeah, so I have to say something as well, because I understand that once you give up the outcome, and if you through your karma, let's say you gain something, let's say for example happiness, it's not because you were expecting it, it's just because it is. So you can say that, and it's just you are still not expecting it but still experiencing it.
Yeah,
you can put it that way, but the problem I have with this is a bit more meta, I guess you can put it that way, because in doing all this, in giving up all the detachment, still this philosophy is trying to point out somehow that there is this higher ultimate self goal that should be reached, which is still a desire, I guess.
Yeah.
And how do you overcome that? That would be the bigger question after all this discussions, I guess.
I mean,
we're giving up all our desires and all the stuff just because we desire this higher transcendence.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a paradox.
Yeah, I understand your
telling us to give up all desire per se. Maybe he's only trying to tell us to give up the minor desires of the materialistic world so that we can focus our attention to the bigger picture, which in this case is the desire to reach the higher consciousness and to attain that higher happiness.
Yes,
I think it's more like what Alan Watts has said, if you're familiar with some of his lectures. If you're desiring to, like, if you're doing something truly without entitlement to any result, then you are by definition not also being entitled to merge with Krishna consciousness. Right? I mean, the very act of doing something genuinely, let's call it genuinely, the very act of doing something genuinely requires you to not be entitled to be one with the Krishna consciousness. Like, if I have a goal in mind, this is exactly your point. Like, I don't think about my material happiness and material loss and material gain, but I think about this transcendent being, merged with God or whatever, then I mean like I'm falling back to the trap of what was before, right? So I think it's possible to transcend this trap by actually genuinely doing things without expecting anything. I don't think it's a paradox necessarily. Although I mean, it's a very strong point that you made, but I think it can be
It's
transcended.
a paradox if it could be considered a paradox if your desire is to be one with
Yeah,
Krishna. As long as you have that desire, you are no longer in that higher transcendence. Then, if you
yeah,
put
yeah,
it that way,
exactly,
then maybe the
exactly, yeah,
paradox goes away.
yeah, yeah, precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So let's go to the next one then. 67. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Again, this is highlighting the like how big a bit the instantaneous gratification senses are. Even one of them can lead a person to go awry. Right, let's go to 68 then. Therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. Same thing. If your senses restrained, you'll have steady intelligence, connection with the God. 69. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-control, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage.
So yeah, in this, I think after reading the purport, it's more related to one who is more intelligent in material sense, and one who is intelligent in more transcendental sense. So the one who is more materialistic in nature, to give up something, let's say, for materialistic, would be a disastrous thing for him. So it would be one, but for the transcendental one, the one who is considered to be transcendentally intelligent, he would consider this to be more correct thing to do. So that day and night for these two classes of men, it becomes different and completely opposite. So to give up material for materialistic man, it would be night for him, but to the introspective sage, as this sentence puts it, would be a beginning of the awakenings, I guess. So that's what I understand, I guess.
Right.
In my view, it is slightly different, not completely different though. I think in here, as you said, Lord Krishna has classified men into two categories: one who gets happiness in transcendental sense, and the other one who gets happiness in materialistic sense. Also, awakening in this text, I think, means the time when a person feels gratified, and night is the time when a person feels indifferent to whatever is happening. So a person who feels gratified in transcendental sense will enjoy doing his duty because he does his duty for the sake of his duty, because he knows just by doing his duty he can reach that transcendental phase that he aims for. So that is his awakening phase. Whereas that time of doing duty is not much of value for the other category of men, because they focus on the result that comes afterwards, that comes immediately afterwards. Uh, so after that, when there is the materialistic gain, then that is when uh, people who focus on materialistic gain enjoys, and that becomes his awakening period. Whereas the period of materialistic gain, uh, whereas the sage kind of person don't feel awakened during that period of materialistic gain.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, more or less, I guess.
Right. So let's move on to the next one. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Right, this is pretty similar to what we've been talking about so far. Right, 71. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship, is devoid of false ego. He alone can attain real peace. Again, pretty similar. We have, that is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the last hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. Okay. So this is the ultimate sort of, let's say, aim of life, is to attain this transcendence, this spiritualness.
It is quite interesting to see that why Arjuna asked about the behavior or nature of the man who is enlightened. Maybe so. Do you have anything to say about that? Like,
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
When Arjuna asked what kind of a man is, this person who has transcended everything. I mean, as far as I could see, Krishna gave a bunch of analogies and examples of what kind of behaviors define a person with steady intelligence, as he put it, and whose consciousness merges with God. I guess that's a satisfying answer as far as I'm concerned.
Like once I know the nature of the one who is enlightened, then will it help me to get enlightened in that way by acting like the one who is enlightened? And then does that lead me to the path of enlightenment? Or in that sense, he is asking the question so that he could also get into the path of enlightenment? Or?
I would say not by acting like the person who is enlightened, but by adopting the mentality of the person who is enlightened. I think that would certainly help, because it's all about how you look at it, right? I mean, you can't act as if you don't care about something while caring about something, and then attain transcendence.
Yeah, that's right. Then it would be just faking it and not
exactly
attaining that thing.
Yeah, but the process of acting itself can impart some intelligence in you, right? Like you do the action repeatedly, and then something just clicks somewhere, and then you realize, okay.
Maybe that could be a way to, practice it. One way to practice it. Maybe it can be a wrong way to practice it, because maybe this is only the way the method of practice that you're stating could be only valid for things that is, more physical and not really that for the transcendental purposes. It's for like maybe practicing guitar, or maybe learning that something like memorizing something, or saying that 2 + 2 is 4 or something like that, but not for something like this, something that is transcendental. Maybe it's a completely separate question.
Like I can vouch for this from my personal experience, that acting as if doesn't really help. It really does need that, like Raj, you put it, that click. That click is important, like not the part that you're acting as if you don't want any sort of desire. I mean, not to claim that I'm doing so now, but I have experienced that merely, let's say, copying someone who you perceive as transcendence behavior, in my experience, it doesn't really help.
Why I'm bringing this point is because it is not so clear what the transcendental person will feel like, right? We only know what it looks like. He's detached from everything. So it is quite hard for any person to get that feeling and then act that way. So it is the easier other way around, right?
Is it easier to?
It is going to be easier to act like that, and then if you act like that, then we reach that transcendental peace. I think it's not going to be that way because
Yeah.
just as what was explained in the previous text, the awakening time for those sages are nightly time for normal people, and the time which is supposed to be night for the sages are the awakening time for the people. Basically, what it translates to is uh, unless you have achieved that high consciousness, normal people are going to get really bored seeing what
Yeah.
the sages do in their regular life,
Yeah. Yeah.
and will get not excited by the things that the sages don't do.
Right. Because I mean, deep down, you still want that.
Yeah,
Want
deep down you still want,
so,
you're still a slave of your senses.
yeah. I mean, you still get frustrated. You still get angry. You still get things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, so what
I
I'm
agree
talking about is like it is a process that you start on. You do not get enlightened in a day. So everything does not just click in a day. So you just have to walk in that path with a hope that you will get enlightened. And in the process, you will get enlightened many times in many ways. Like somewhere in the path you leave some kind of desires. Okay, you are detached from those kind of desires. Then you move along, and then other desires also you can
Yeah.
gradually renounce. I think it is a process, not like
Right.
it will just click
Right.
at once and then.
Right.
I have a complete opposite view with this. It could be a gradual enlightenment, but there could be some sort of sudden enlightenment as well. Because after what I read is this, it says that if one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. It says that, so it implies some sort of sudden self-realization. So it doesn't. It might need some sort of a guidance, but you can also gain it somehow through simultaneously or all of a sudden by through self-realization. So it's not just gradual enlightenment. You can also have some sort of sudden enlightenment.
But I do
At
agree
least,
with him in the sense that, I mean, like there are different dimensions to life. And I think being enlightened in one dimension is not necessarily the same thing as being enlightened, whatever that may mean. Let's keep the word enlightened vague, but
Right.
It's not the same thing. Like if I'm self-aware about something, it doesn't mean I'm self-aware about everything else. So in that way, I do agree with Raj. But once again, I do disagree in that I don't think merely copying someone's actions will do it. I think it does require like genuine self-reflection and having that click.
I agree with the
yeah,
fact that
that
you have
is
Say that
to
it helps in getting one in a track. Like because starting the journey, it is quite easier to build up some kind of routine and act in a certain way, and then maybe it goes both way. I understand what you're trying to say, that sometimes you feel like you are not genuine or something like that. That should not be there, but there is a hope that you will really get enlightened someday.
Right.
yeah, maybe the acting like an enlightened person can help, because maybe just by acting like them you somehow imitate also the mental state of their by some
Don't you think
neurological
it's more dangerous though?
basis.
I mean,
I don't know. Yeah, it could be dangerous. It could be more like you could be more faking it. But
yeah,
still,
yeah.
maybe
Okay.
it is possible. Maybe it might be possible. Who knows? Because
So
enlightenment
it is dangerous in a way that if you are saying that you are enlightened, so to everybody else, and then
Yeah.
but you can act like
the
that
knowledge
for
can be
yourself,
dangerous.
right?
I mean,
As we say.
it's not just saying it to others; it's also saying it to yourself, which is kind of the most important thing. Um,
yeah.
like
So
saying
the
it to
point is
others
to
is bad enough, but yeah,
so the point is to find someone who is enlightened and ask them.
yeah.
So we can only speculate from this lower level of consciousness, I guess.
Right. I think,
Okay.
Let's move forward.
right. So yeah, that's the end of chapter 2. So I guess that will, unless anyone has any comments to add.
Not really.
Right. So I guess that'll do it for this episode. Next time we'll pick up chapter 3 and finish that hopefully. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.